K-pop companies will literally have their idols doing the most insane thing to garner attention from the mainstream, but the one thing they won't do is listen to what fans actually want. This is another not so serious video. Take it as a unpopular opinions part 2, but this time, instead of complaining about what K-pop fans do, I'm going to be talking about what K-pop companies do that I don't like. So these are things that either I'm neutral about, so they don't make me any more or less interested in a group, or worse, actively makes me want to stop supporting a group entirely. Just my personal K-pop icks, take them as you will. There's some of these that are, most of these are so personal. Like, you could totally like them and that's totally fine. I'm pretty sure one is a pretty popular tactic too, like strategy. So really, it's totally personal. So if I mention a group that you enjoy, don't take it personally. In fact, I'm only going to be talking about groups that I do like that still use these strategies, just because like I don't really keep up with groups I don't like. So if you see a group here that you enjoy, know that I like them too. And without further ado, let's just get into some of my K-pop icks. Don't get me wrong, I love lore in a group. Finding out a group that I adore has this deep lore, or it doesn't even have to be deep, but at least it doesn't have to be abandoned halfway through, is always such a treat. Even something as simple as giving each member a color or an animal representative, like I adore that. But here's the thing, it should be an extra, the cherry on top if you will, not the full meal. The biggest draw of the group should not be its lore or its storyline, but rather its music. I won't get into a group solely because they have interesting lore. In fact, no matter how interesting the lore is, if the group doesn't produce music that I enjoy, then I won't care for how detailed or how great the story is. There are times when I feel like creating these detailed storyline takes precedent over creating good music. And I don't think that's fair to the idols. They became idols so they can perform and create music, not to become vessels for these stories. Another thing, if the lore ends up hurting songs. My first thought immediately goes to aespa's energy. Like, what a great song, but it's completely ruined by them naming themselves as if they're taking sci-fi roll call. That didn't need to happen. It's so jarring and takes me out of the music. I don't need to be reminded of who this song is sung by, especially since the song already has the word aespa sung in it. The song doesn't need to stop for a good 5 seconds for the girls to name themselves and their sci-fi weapons. And that's all it takes, 5 seconds for me to take the song less seriously. That shouldn't happen. That's weird. This no longer feels like an opening for an album, but instead it feels like it's an opening for a cartoon or an anime. If I'm not going to watch the girls fight a monster on a weekly basis, then they don't need to be making opening music for Monster of the Week type of cartoons. If you're going to add lore-specific details to the music, it has to blend seamlessly. Keeping my example of aespa, when they say Kwangwa, it doesn't take me out of the song, mostly because it's so short. It has to feel like a song first and foremost, rather than a medium to present these storylines. If you can't blend the two, then I suggest dropping one and that being the storyline. Another problem with having such heavy-handed lore references within your songs is that it forces people to be caught up with the lore, or else be severely confused. aespa can get away with doing this in their opening because I'm assuming if you're listening to their opening, you probably care about their lore, unless you're a new fan. However, if the lore references are subtle enough that fans or listeners that aren't in the know can still enjoy it without being caught off guard, then I believe you've succeeded in blending them seamlessly together. I know I used aespa as an example, but I really do want to emphasize that I enjoy their music and I adore their latest comeback too. And even though sometimes I do find the lore heavy-handed in some of their songs, for the most part, I can ignore it. It's just a pet peeve and it really kept me from getting into aespa's discography for a long time. And I really resented that this has kept me from enjoying their music for a long time. And you can blame me and my personal taste for that, but any chance I can to blame SM for something, I will take it. So survival shows. I don't like them. I don't like survival shows, and I tend not to care about the survival shows group post-show either. It takes me years to give the group a chance. Well, maybe not years. Some of them did take me years. I only got into IZONE after they disbanded. I'm not keeping up with IWALY or Kepler, even though it has Eugene from CLC or Crystal Clear from the OG fans. I was a huge fan of CLC and when I was a Cube stan. Yeah, I had a Cube dick writer phase. Yeah, some people stan a big free company. Nope. 15-year-old me saw the failing company that was Cube and was like, that's the one I'm betting on. Don't know why, just happened. It even took me a while to get into TWICE because I found out they were a group formed from a survival show and immediately turned me off from them. Same with Stray Kids and now even with HYBE. I hear from they're from a survival show and I'm immediately like, I don't really want to follow up with them. And you might be thinking, well, you just don't like getting attached to someone just for them not to debut in the final lineup. Except I don't watch the survival shows except for Are You Next? And that was a total mistake. So there is no attachment for me to get disappointed from. I only discovered these groups after they're formed, and I still aren't interested, so there is no attachment. It's like I discovered that these groups were formed from a survival show, and then I'm not interested. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. It doesn't even make sense to me. I don't understand this thought process. At first, I thought I was doing this because I was protecting myself from the disappointment of the eventual disbandment of these temporary groups, like the Mnet groups, but it doesn't matter if the group was temporary or not. Like I said, this happened with me twice. If it was attached to a survival show, I was immediately put off. I have no explanation for this. I don't know why my brain does this. I'm confused by my own actions and my own thoughts. Because really, there's no true difference between a survival show group and a regular one. Especially if they're not temporary. And it doesn't help that the one time I do get into a survival show, none of my top picks make it, except for one, but two, but she left the group early. Or before they even got a chance to debut. And what sucks is like every week there's a new survival show popping up and it tires me so much. And I don't know if it's because I don't keep up with survival shows. It feels like every week there's a new one, or every time I see one, it feels like that's one too many already. So I don't know. Like I give permission for someone to psychoanalyze this behavior because even I don't understand myself. Survival show they fatigue me and I don't know why. So lives and reality TV content and that sort of stuff. I just never had the patience for them. This is the same with Floor. It doesn't matter how entertaining the idols are off stage. I don't like their music or performances. I'm not going to support them. They could be the most entertaining, the funniest idols, and I would not care. They should be comedians instead. This kind of reminds me of this one trend where people are saying what groups they don't stand because of their personalities and stuff. And someone replied to that being like, oh, it's a good thing I stand performers, not comedians. And I have to agree with that. I do not care if one group has funnier members than the other. That has no bearing on whether I stand them or not. But when I was first really got involved in K-pop fandom, it was also at the same time that Vlives was super popular. And at the time, people were saying if you don't watch their lives, you're not really a fan of the group. Sure, only toxic fans were saying that, but still, it pissed me off, Like, what do you mean I don't have a favorite episode of theirs on their YouTube channel? It just means I don't watch it. It doesn't mean I'm any less of a fan. I'll watch the highlights, maybe, or I'll watch them in talk shows occasionally, but these aren't the reasons I'm a fan of who I'm fans of. It doesn't matter to me. Personally, this was never my biggest draw as a fan to any idol. So having more communication or interactions with fans with idols is not a big draw for me. You'll never catch me with those fan calls with idols. Never it's not my thing. I want them to be good people for the most part, but I don't care if they have dry personalities. I mean, I get it. They're entertainers, but I'm satisfied with being entertained by the music. Don't get me wrong, I do have biases that are very entertaining and charismatic outside of the stage, such as Seungkwan from 17. He is my bias, but it has nothing to do with how charismatic he is when he's not performing, or quote-unquote performing, because he is still performing when he's doing these lives, but I'm more drawn to him as a performer when he's performing music, when he's singing and dancing. So the whole excessive stuff of creating content such as particular episodes on their YouTube channels, it doesn't interest me. Instead, it kind of overwhelms me. It's just so much content that it turns me off from their channel. Like, I don't think I follow any individual group's channels because this is just not content that I'm interested in. Like, I'll never stop following a group because they produce too much content. So this is more of a thing that is useless for me that companies do rather than something that turns me off from groups. But I understand that this is super popular this is a big draw in from many people. So this is just a personal thing. Gangster Costumes, and this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a really long time, and this is essentially when K-pop idols dress up as foreign gangsters or use the aesthetics of gangsters that aren't authentic to them, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to say it's appropriation, but if you want to make that argument, I'm definitely not the one that's going to disagree with you. It's just, I find it interesting that whenever they want to embody this tough image, they automatically go for foreign gangsters because there's a language of aesthetics, right? You know what a gangster looks like. Typically in the West or even in Latin America, if it's not a mob boss or Al Capone, the Godfather, then it's like street gangsters and drug dealers. And this is very different from the aesthetics of gangsters in Korea. They have similarities, but they're also distinct visually. And when you're too afraid to utilize the aesthetics of violence near you, then the illusion of toughness you were portraying is lost. Because let's be real, I'm never going to believe that these pristine, proper idols are tough gangsters. Like, that was never going to be believed. But when I watch a music video, I allow for a bit of suspension of disbelief. And that's completely broken when it's so blatantly a costume. For example, of someone who did both, CL. When CL dressed like a chola in her Baddest Female music video, she didn't look tough or as hard as she probably meant to be, or how her creative director and stylist probably wanted her to appear as. It honestly just looks like a cheap costume, which it is, rather than her really embodying a character. And now I don't believe she's the baddest female, and the whole purpose of the music video is kind of lost. However, on the other hand, also, I think it goes without saying how distasteful it is to use an Mexican-American aesthetic to portray toughness to a mostly Korean audience. There's just something about it that rubs me the wrong way. I said I don't believe any of these idols could be gangsters, but I can believe that they are aware of violence of organized crime in South Korea. And that understanding already allows for my suspension of disbelief to remain intact when I'm watching a music video. A good example of, Korean gangster aesthetic being utilized well, and more specifically Korean gangster aesthetic, is Bibi's Kazino music video, or even her music video for Vengeance. Like, if you're going to use organized crime as an aesthetic, which personally I'd rather you not, but if you must, then don't be such a coward that you opt from one all across the globe. Forcing a message. I feel like there are a lot of K-pop groups that intertwine their identity with a message, and I don't think that's always a good idea. I think more than a concept or a lore, a message can box a group even more so, because all your songs kind of have to fit into this message, even if only tangentially. And this can stifle a group severely, especially if the message isn't that profound or interesting. If we're being very honest here, the messages that groups have currently decided to place on themselves aren't that rebellious. Not that I ever expected that from a group, but I do hate the self-congratulatory nature that it can breed. Like, oh, group is so important because they're bringing real issues into K-pop, and the message will be some self-help quote, something like that. I'm sorry, but if your whole moral is the same as some Disney Channel original movie, then it's not as impressive as something truly out of the norm. It's giving very much Pinterest self-help quotes, if you know what I mean. For comparison, BTS's earlier work in which they criticized specific things within Korean culture to the point that I had to Google certain terms because they were so specific, now that's way more impactful. But that felt way more genuine than the whole love yourself era, because one really felt like they were giving out a message and another was just trying to appeal to as many people with some inoffensive generic slogan. I hate that I always bring them up, but they are such a good example for so many things just because of how long their careers have been and just how popular they are. Everyone knows them, so that's why I always bring them up. Another point is, just because a song has a good message doesn't mean it's good, which I've said in my unpopular opinion videos, but I wanted to elaborate more here. I feel like some fans expect you to give points for songs for not being vapid party music, but real music with a message. But the sad thing is that these songs with good messages end up sounding just as shallow as the vapid party music because the message is so neutral. It just feels like a gimmick for companies to get fans to defend songs, even if they're not good, to guilt you into liking songs because it has a message you agree with. And of course they're going to use a message that is so universally understood as good or correct. Like, be unique, love your body, or love yourself. Like, yeah, of course people agree with that. I don't know, it just feels very cheap. So that's the end of my opinions on marketing strategies that companies do that don't appeal to me. I think this is the end of my opinion series because there's not really much else for me to say besides what I've said in my first video and what I've said now. I think my next video I want to do is on titles, on K-pop titles, and whether or not they're still relevant or not, and if it's a good thing if they're going away. Please tell me if you're interested in such a video and if there's anything you would like me to talk about regarding to titles, if you've gone this far. Anyways, thank you for watching and see you until next time.